Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Healing Art After Hours. I'm Shauna Robeson with Creating Space Coastal, and in this video I will be introducing part 1 of what I like to call Moodling, or doodling your mood. This is a fun and creative way to connect and process with trapped or unresolved feelings or emotions. This is a real-time recording from one of my live Healing Art Happy Hour workshops, so please check out the links in the show notes below for more information or to download a copy of this presentation. Let's get started. All right. So welcome everybody to Introduction to Moodling. And I know that there is an app out there or there's software called Moodle, and I'm not trying to infringe on that, but I just thought that this was a great name for doodling your mood. So I'm going to go with it. It's just my own little, term that I coined for this, as far as I know. But I thought it was kind of fun. And so what is it? Well, basically it's, like I said, doodling your mood. But I wanted to talk a little bit about, what is mood? What are emotions? Because it's really about connecting to our more subconscious emotions and trying to release some maybe trapped emotions that are in there. So what is a mood? A mood is a lingering or after effect of an emotion. It's less intense than an emotion or a feeling, but it's more longer duration. And it could also be a result of unresolved emotions from the past, or it could even be due to like physiological or just wellness issues that, so physical or mental unrest that you're having. So moods can be affected by lots of things. But regardless, it is a feeling. It is connected to emotions, and I wanted to also kind of tease apart feelings versus emotions because they're often used interchangeably. And so how I'm going to be using it, I wanted to just clarify. You can use it however you want, but just so we're on the same page with how I mean. But so when I'm talking about feelings, I'm talking about more the sensations that you feel when you're in an emotional state. So it's more, like I said, the sensation. And I'll talk a little bit more about, what is emotion, because it's a really complex and very deep subject. And so I want to just give you enough of where I'm coming from with this process so that we're on the same page, but there's so many rabbit holes you could go down on this topic because I actually spent this week going down those rabbit holes and trying to decide what it is that I want to share, what's enough to share where I'm not fire hosing you with emotion, talking about emotional and then like EQ or like emotional intelligence. And I mean, you can just go down the whole rabbit hole. So I'm trying to keep it fairly light and simple, but enough so that you understand the benefits of what this process is. So again, the sensations that you might feel when you're having emotions are what I mean by the feeling. So emotion. Back to what is moodling. So emotions, humans can experience around 34,000 emotions. And that is why it's such a complex and deep rabbit hole type topic, because that's really complex. And we often have a hard time articulating or even understanding what emotion we're feeling or that we're experiencing. And so sometimes you don't have an awareness of what's going on. Back in the day, when I first started to learn more about emotion regulation and emotional intelligence, I was going through a difficult time, and I tend to be an emotional eater. So that's one of my coping mechanisms for when I'm having strong emotions. And I found it wasn't just negative emotions. It could be, oh, I'm happy, I want to eat and celebrate. Oh, I'm sad, I want to eat and comfort myself. Oh, I'm angry, I want to just avoid and go eat. So I didn't have a healthy relationship with food. And so I was able to learn through this program that I went through. And one of those things they talked about was learning how to be aware of, emotions, because I chalked everything up to frustration. Every feeling I had or every emotion I had was just frustration. And which is it is a emotion. There's some primary emotions, and then you have secondary emotions, and there's ranges within each emotion. So this wheel of emotions that was created by Dr. Robert Plutchik to try to simplify emotions and help us to process them. He breaks it down to 8 primary emotions, and there are several different organizations that have broken it up into different numbers of primary emotions. But I just thought I liked this because it's a color wheel and it's a mandala. And I thought it might be fun when we were doing mandalas to create a feel wheel. So that's the reason I chose this particular one. But this is what he breaks down the emotions in. And he even has it where there's combinations of emotions, and then sort of like we have the primary colors, and then the secondary colors and the tertiary colors. Well, he breaks down emotions that way too. And I think in many ways, there's such a connection between color and emotion because, we relate color to emotions so much. So there's a deep connection there. So I thought that this was a great representation of it, starting with based on that, based on the aesthetics of it and just the concepts. And he also talks about the contrasting emotions. So the emotions across this wheel are opposite emotions on the wheel. So again, it ties into that color wheel. So I thought that was really cool. And so I just wanted to share that as a starting point, and then talk a little bit about some other resources of how to break down what emotion is. Now, here's one definition of an emotion. I'm going to read it to you. An episode of interrelated synchronized changes in the state of all or most of the 5 organismic subsystems in response to the evaluation of an internal or external stimulus as relevant to major concerns of the organism. So that is a mouthful. And so that can tell you how complex emotions are, if you even just looking at that complex definition. But I wanted to break it down and simplify a little bit of what I'm talking about with emotions. So emotion happens, and it's actually this sort of cyclical process that happens. An event happens, some kind of stimulus happens in our lives that we then pass through our filter, and this all happens in a split second. It passes through our filters. Our filters are what our past experiences have been. So if we've experienced similar events or stimulus in the past, our minds actually are really good at rewiring so that we can process information faster and be more efficient at responding to a stimulus. But what that means is we can be really efficient at reacting to something before we've had time to really process it. So that's what happens with when we have difficulty with impulse, is we get really efficient at going from stimulus to reaction without processing time. And that's part of, all of emotions are about survival. All of these, whether you consider them positive or negative emotions, they are actually designed to be a survival instinct. So they are important and they are helpful. All of the range of them are. But so you have a prompting event, you have your filters, and then through those filters, you have an interpretation of the event. And that's where you give meaning to it. And you either give a positive or a negative meaning, or a range within that of a meaning to that event. And then because of that interpretation, so now if you're thinking of it's negative, then you're going to start have a reaction, a biological change. If you're feeling, for example, fear or anger, you're going to have a different reaction in your body than if it's something where you feel at peace or calm or joy. So your body then starts reacting to whatever it is that you are, the meaning that you put to this stimulus. And then that biological change, you start to feel a sensation. So those are those feelings. So let's say our heart starts to beat faster, then we might feel like we might feel our heart racing. You know, sometimes you can feel your pulse in your neck. You might feel your face flush, or you feel hot, things like that. So the sensations that you feel after the physiological changes, which happen instantaneously, and then we express those feelings. That's how we communicate to other people. So through expressions, facial expressions, our mouths, we might grimace or smile or frown. And you can kind of tell someone's feeling oftentimes by how they're expressing them. And then there's the action urge. So what are we urged to do? So if we're afraid, we might be urged to run away, or we might want to fight. Anger tends to bring out more fighting urges. So we have an action urge, and now we have to decide, what do we do with this urge to go into action? And that's why emotions are so important for our survival, because they do actually motivate us to action. Whatever the action is, a lot of the emotions are what is what pushes us into action to get things done. So we need to have that stress, or we need to be kind of pushed into that, and that's what emotions do. So a lot of times when people have negative emotions, they want to tamper those down, and they don't want to feel them because they feel maybe guilt or shame, which is another emotion, around having those feelings. And they don't just go away. That's the challenge. We stuff them down, but they linger inside of us there if we don't let them process. And so what would be better to do, more healthy, is to process them, allow yourself to feel them, move past them, and then and learn to regulate them through that awareness and through that processing. So that's a little bit healthier, because what happens is you get this effect of kind of like a pressure cooker. You put it away, put it away, put it away. And that's why you see these people who everybody might describe them as quiet, timid, calm, and then suddenly they explode and do some crazy thing. And you never expected it, because that person maybe was really trying to, they were really trying to ignore those emotions, but they just don't disappear spontaneously. That's the challenge. So, all right. So moving on from that, I just have a couple examples of breaking down emotions in this wheel. So an example is joy. And one event that is common for joy is gain a valued object. So maybe something you've been dreaming of for a long time, or you've been wanting or desiring in your life. And then suddenly now you have this thing, and that brings joy to you. The interpretation might be, this is the story part of the program after our filters. The filter is, okay, I've been longing for this for a long time. So that's where my state of mind when this happens. My interpretation is, I finally have what I deserve. And then the biological change might be an increased heart rate. I'm so excited. I have this thing now that I've been wanting. I might feel excited and energized by having this thing. And then I might smile or giggle, and I might have an action urge to jump up and down and do a little dance or a jig. So this is the process of the cycle. And where we have the most control, of course, is with our interpretations. This is where we can say, okay, how can we look at this in different ways? And that can help, especially if it's a negative emotion, that we want to control our behavior a little bit. Sometimes the action urge to jump up and down, that might be great, but if you're in a courtroom and you're in a lawyer and you just won a case, it might not be appropriate for that place. That might not help you. So this is another place where we control our action urge. We can have an urge, but we have to decide if the action that we are urged to do is going to help or hinder us or the situation. And a good rule of thumb is, if you can't make it better, at least don't make it worse in whatever situation it is. So these are the two places where we can control. We can control how we think about things and how we interpret things. We can process that and spend time with that. And we can also control what behavior that we have. So, and we want to regulate that in a healthy way, in a balanced way. So another one is sadness, and events might be a loss of a loved one. Filters might be, you might have had past losses recently or even longer in the past, but maybe because you've had so many losses, your interpretation is that people keep abandoning you. So that's just an added exacerbator of the feeling that you might have. And then the biological change might be tear production. And you feel maybe an ache in the chest or loneliness. And then your expression might be frowning or crying. And then an action urge might be to sob or to sleep or just to, you know, kind of curl up. So that's just an example of the processes one might go. Now, I mentioned in the notes, I said, you know, feelings are always valid, even when they're not justified. And that's a little confusing because sometimes we use valid and justified as the same meaning. But what I'm talking about is feelings happen. As you can see, this cycle happens pretty instantaneously. And sometimes we can't really control, we rarely can control the feeling that we have. Maybe if we can shift our perspective, our interpretation, that could affect our feeling. But oftentimes feelings happen without warning. And they're based on our interpretation, they're based on our experiences. So they happen spontaneously. So as far as we know in our belief in what we're feeling, this is a valid feeling. Now, the justification piece comes from, is what you're feeling in line with the reality of what's happening? Are your filters maybe tweaking reality to a point where your reaction or your feelings about this are more than what is warranted for the events that happened? And this comes into play when, you know, a loss of a loved one is something that we all experience in life. But if you've had several losses of loved ones, your reaction might be amplified for you compared to someone else with the same experience. And so you have to address that and say, okay, is this justified feeling? Yeah, loss of a loved one is going to create a big feeling. So, and then the question is, the action urge that you have, I mean, if you just stop life, is that reasonable? Is that going to be supportive? And is that justified given the circumstance? And that's where you have to assess and say, hey, you know, this isn't a justified situation where I need to shut my life down. This is not what they would want. You know, I have to move forward. So the feeling is valid. You need to honor that and be validated about the feeling, but you also need to just assess if what you're feeling is in line, reasonable with what the situation is, and decide for yourself, then using your wise mind, what the action step should be, the next step should be for what you can do. Okay, I'm going down the rabbit hole too far, so sorry. This stuff excites. I'm like a little bit of a psycho nerd, so I like psychology nerd. Maybe psycho nerd is the Freudian slip. Okay, so another example, a fear. An event might be you're threatened by a neighbor. Filters might be that you've had a bad history with this neighbor, or, you know, repeated escalation of things with that neighbor. And the interpretation might be that they're really going to harm me or my family. So your biological changes might be a flushed face, your muscles might get tense, you know, you might be shivering of fear, you might feel butterflies in your stomach, breathlessness. The expression could be, you know, your eyebrows raise, you're like, you know, maybe you're shocked that they're threatening you, your eyes widen. And then you have an action urge to fight or fly or to run away, flight. So, so those are just a few examples of how you can process, you know, through. And then I have anger as well. These are just the top 4 that are pretty common emotions that people, bring up. Anger, the event might someone cuts in front of you in line. The filters might be repeated past experiences of people cutting in front of you. That's one of my pet peeves. So, interpretation, they think that they are more important than me. Their time is more valuable than me. You might feel an increased heart rate or a clenched jaw. That's the biological change. And then you might feel a hot face or tightening in the chest. Your brows, burrow into a frown. You might, your mouth might turn into a scowl. And then your action urge might be to yell at them or to push them out of line or do something, physical. So now I have to decide, okay, am I going to start yelling at this person? That might be what I want to do in my mind, but maybe I just say, hey, I was already here in line. You could talk to them. You could try to work out. That would be, a better response, even though my initial urge might be to like scream at them. That's my fantasy in my head, but I don't have to behave that way. I can recognize that if I be aggressive, that might just make things worse and I might not get what I want. And if I ask them nicely, maybe they'll just recognize, oh, I didn't see you in line. They might not have even noticed you there. So that's, again, that interpretation thing. Okay, so to the moodling or doodling your mood and why do it. So the emotional awareness is really what I'm trying to bring to you. And also to recognize that even if you don't have an awareness of what your emotions are, you can still use creative outlets to process, even if you can't articulate or not even sure what it is that you're feeling. So as I said before in the first week, I said doodling is a form of self-expression, a connection to subconscious through complex interaction between eye, brain, and nervous system and hand. And oftentimes our traumatic experiences that we've had in our life, whether everyone would consider it traumatic, it might be only traumatic for you, but whatever it was, whatever, hurts that you've had over your life, those often get tucked away into that subconscious. We push them out because we don't always have time to deal with them. And that's a coping mechanism that helps us, keep moving on. So sometimes they get stuck in there. And this is just a way to release those and to tap into some of those skills and things that we have in our subconscious. And it allows us to release the negative energy that might be trapped in there. How we doodle can also offer insights to our personality and state of mind. So when you creating is really all about making choices throughout the process. You're just choosing this pattern, that pattern, this color. You're choosing to go this way or that way. And all those choices come from your intuition and your inner guide. And sometimes we can review what we've laid out and get a picture of where we're at. When we are working on creating and we're not in the best headspace, sometimes our work looks very different than when we're creating in a very positive headspace. And oftentimes we feel more like creating when we're in a positive headspace, but I'm proposing that even when we're not, that might even be more important to try to work out some of that energy, the negative energy that you're feeling, and get it out on the page in the form of creating. So that's what I find that helps me, is to do it not only as an escape. I mean, that's certainly one of the benefits of doing it, because you get really hyper focused in the project and then you can let go of whatever else is going. But I'm saying not only doing that, but actually embracing the feeling while you're doing it and getting that feeling out into a visual component, a visual representation of that feeling or emotion. So how do we do that? Well, I broke it down into some steps. And again, this is just something that I mean, maybe there's stuff out there like this, but I don't really know. So I sort of created my own little pathway here. But to start off, just, taking that sort of deep centering breath. Now let's see, I'm getting messages. I want to make sure it's nobody trying to get into class, because that's what happens is okay. So tune your attention, just like we did on our thoughts in the neurographic art, we're going to tune our attention into emotions. So that's the feelings, the sensations that we're having, the mood that you're in, really tuning into what are you experiencing? Are you experiencing, tense muscles? Are you having, pain in your stomach? Are you feeling tightness in your chest? Are you feeling excited? Are you feeling like your heart is fluttering? What is it that you're experiencing? And now you can do this as, okay, I had an event and I'm now in the mood, or I'm experiencing a feeling, and now I'm going to sit down and do my thing. So it's something that's really current that's going on in your life. Or it can be that you're reflecting back on something that's maybe been one of those things that keeps you up at night, that you keep replaying in your head, those events that you just, I don't know about you, but I oftentimes, I'm a perseverator at times where I just replay a conversation or an event or something in my head that's caused a lot of feelings or emotions. And you can go back to that moment and reflect on that, and then see what kinds of feelings and what kinds of experiences that you have. So tune in to whatever it is that you want to address, and then let yourself feel it, and then start to just really observe. Now you can write down, if you have words for some of these things, if you want to write down feeling fluttering in my chest, I'm feeling, I can't breathe. If you have words, you can write those down. If you don't need to, because you can just do it through the art. So I feel is where you're just going to start, and then try to visualize that sensation. Is it a sharp sensation? Is it a soft? Does it have, sharp corners? Does it have, could you, if you closed your eyes and imagined it as a shape, it doesn't have to be like anything real. It can be very abstract, but is it prickly? Is it smooth? Is it silky? Is it a color? Like, what do you visualize that feeling as, if you want to express it as something visual? So see if you can, think about different associations that you might have with that feeling. I know that when I think about, when I'm feeling joy, I'm feeling energized. I feel like, okay, the sun, which is energizing and bright and glowing. So I get all of these different visuals that go along with that concept of joy and happiness and energy. So when you're feeling whatever it is, see what comes to mind if you just take a minute to visualize that sensation. Then doodle whatever you're inspired to do. If you want to do a portrait, or you want to try to make it more realism, great. If you just want to do shapes, great. Whatever it is, just, put it down on the paper. See what happens. You can just lay your, put your pen to paper and just start moving. And sometimes people will start with like a scribble exercise and then see if shapes start forming. Just let yourself go and see what comes out. And you may be surprised, or you may be really clear about what your feelings look like. So just let it be what it is. You can, even if you're not sure where to start, you could go back and look at all of those pre-designed tangles that we've, from those resources, and say, okay, I want to find a tangle that represents my current mood. I'm currently feeling kind of anxious, some anxiety, which is a lower level of fear. That's in that fear range. So I'm feeling anxious. What is a tangle that looks kind of like anxious to me? So look through the patterns and see if there's something that represents to you anxiety. Is it zigzag lines, or, I don't want to give you guys too many ideas about it, but just whatever it is that represents that energy to you. So you're, even just searching shapes on, on Pinterest or anything, patterns, look at fabrics, what is this fabrics what kind of emotion does that elicit? Is this one that brings you more fear, or is this something that's more happy? So be willing to look around and see what things in your environment help you identify the shape of that feeling. You could even try closing your eyes and just, like I said, you could see colors or images just might come to you, and then put it out on your doodle. And the reason it's a doodle is because it's not, again, it's not about the finished product. It's more about the process of it. And I mean, the finished product will give you some clues about your state of mind or your mood, but it's really not about creating a masterpiece. It's about trying to articulate in a nonverbal way through visual art what it is that you're feeling, and let those emotions out. After you're done, you do observe it. Like I said, you may notice things about it and go, oh, I thought I was feeling joy, but when I look at this piece that I just did, I'm getting more of a sense of anxiety. Maybe, am I feeling anxious about something? Maybe I don't want to feel anxious, and so I'm trying to say that I'm joyful, but maybe I'm really feeling some anxiety that I didn't know. So you can interpret some of what it is based on how it makes you feel. How do you feel different after you're done completing this process? Do you feel lighter? Do you feel better? Do you feel worse? Do you feel like you've opened a doorway to maybe some deeper hurts that you need more processing on? And don't ever hesitate to work with a therapy. I'm not suggesting that art is taking the place of having a good therapist. I just think it's something that could be, something that could support other types of therapy and healing. But anyway, just assess what it is. How do you feel different? Observe and just be aware. That's the key thing, is just creating some awareness about your feelings. Now, I've created, this is the template that I was talking about. And in that wheel that I showed you, it had 8 different primary emotions, but it also had the different ranges. So there's the intensities. So as you move closer to the center of the circle, the feeling is more intense. And as you move away, it's less intense. So in how I have it in this template is that the primary emotions in the center, and then I have a lighter, like the less intense is on the left, and then the more intense is on the right. And so the idea is to create some shapes. And again, we're going to be doing some exercises, and you don't have to do this whole page, and so you don't have to print it out right this second, but it's in there. You can print it out if you're interested. Otherwise, you can just do this on regular plain sheet of paper for now, what we're going to work on. But just go through and see if there's something that you can doodle in each of these boxes that might represent that emotion, and see if that you can. I mean, I think it's a fun exercise. It's like, okay, what represents serenity to me? Is it just a straight line? Really, like a smooth, glossy, like lake? Yeah, that could be all it is. It's just a line. So there's no right or wrong. It's just your interpretation. So you can print out the template. This is just on the slideshow, but I also have it as a separate PDF that's online. And I think, yeah, that's the end of. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if you find this content helpful. And please stay tuned for part 2 of this topic. Thank you so much. And as always, happy creating.